Week 19, Day 1. Megalomania. Abnormal desire for wealth and power.
Hitler's megalomania was a veneer for his insecurity and feelings of inferiority.
Profligate. Wasteful.
With a singular disregard for his family, the profligate husband spent his salary on alcohol.
Strife. Discord, disagreement.
Each spouse said that the other was culpable for their conjugal strife.
Legion. A large number.
The number of my followers is legion, said the flamboyant politician.
Coup. Revolution.
The necessity for executing the leaders of the abortive coup was obviated when they committed suicide.
To play possum. To try to fool someone, to make believe one is asleep or dead.
Sensing that his life was in jeopardy, the hunter played possum until the voracious lion disappeared.
Trouble in Ruritania. King Andrei of Ruritania was afflicted with megalomania, and the people of his country suffered, as a result. After 10 years of his profligate rule, the treasury was bankrupt, unemployment was rampant, domestic strife was mounting, and the number of the king's opponents who were incarcerated were legion. Following a bloodless coup, his nephew, Prince Schubert, took command of the poor nation.
Week 19, Day 2. Amnesty. A general pardon.
We recognize the dictator's amnesty as an obvious feint that would be withdrawn after Christmas.
Expatriate. An exile.
The itinerant poet, living abroad for 20 years, was a voluntary expatriate.
Exonerate. To free from guilt.
When the jury began to deliberate, they were prepared to exonerate the culprit.
Fiat. An official order, a decree.
One cannot govern by fiat, the sedentary mayor quickly learned. It is necessary to get out and meet the citizens if you want their cooperation.
Mendacious. Lying, untrue.
The publisher's mendacious claims led to a myriad of lawsuits.
It's an ill wind that blows nobody good. Someone usually benefits from another person's misfortune.
When the star quarterback broke his leg, the coach gave the rookie his big chance and the youngster made good. The coach mumbled, "It's an ill wind."
Prince Schubert in action. Prince Schubert's first move was to declare an amnesty for political prisoners, and to invite home all Ruritanian expatriates. Those who had been jailed on false charges were exonerated by special tribunals. The young leader announced that he would abrogate all of the oppressive fiats that his predecessor had promulgated. Things began to look up temporarily for the citizens, who perceived in Prince Schubert the sincerity, idealism, and honesty that had been lacking in the mendacious King Andrei.
Week 19, Day 3. Parsimonious. Miserly.
Unless my boss modifies his parsimonious attitude, a fractious picket line is going to be erected.
Pecuniary. Financial.
Clarence Day deemed that pecuniary matters are best handled by men.
Dismantle. To strip of covering, take apart.
I plan to dismantle the stereo set and clean all the components.
Sumptuous. Lavish.
The sumptuous feast was prepared with impeccable care.
Underwrite. Agree to finance.
When our rivals agreed to underwrite the cost of our trip, a myriad of suspicions began to form in my mind.
To know the ropes. To be fully acquainted with the procedures.
The president of the senior class knew the ropes and quickly taught me my duties.
Reform movement. In order to improve Ruritania's financial position, an astute but parsimonious treasurer was installed, and given wide pecuniary powers. He tried to get the little country back on its feet, by slashing all waste from its budget, dismantling King Andrei's sumptuous palaces, and firing all incompetents. In addition, Prince Schubert was able to get the United States to underwrite a substantial loan that would enable him to start a program of public works. Even so, Ruritania was still in desperate trouble.
Week 19, Day 4. Restrictive. Harsh, confining.
The rebel's innate hatred of restrictive decrees led him to crave freedom all the more.
Balk. To refuse to move.
Jimmy was a lawbreaker, but he would balk at the idea of carrying a lethal weapon.
Blunt. Plain spoken.
A string of caustic epithets was directed at the recruit by his blunt sergeant.
Nostalgia. Yearning for the past.
Although the former farm girl pretended to be urbane, a feeling of nostalgia always came over her when she heard country music.
Rife. Widespread.
Criticism of the author was rife among the coterie of intellectuals who used to praise him.
Behind the eight ball. In trouble.
Susan found herself behind the eight ball in chemistry when she failed to do the term project.
Disappointment and dedication. When Prince Schubert asked for additional restrictive measures, the people began to balk. Speaking on radio, the young reformer explained the reasons for higher taxes and food rationing. He was blunt when he stated the need for personal sacrifices. Nevertheless, the resistance to reform was great, and nostalgia for the good old days of King Andrei began to grow. The people admitted that graft and corruption had been rife under Andrei, but at least everybody got his slice of the pie. Although Prince Schubert was tempted to quit, he determined that he would help the people in spite of themselves.
Week 20, Day 1. Reviled. Scolded.
Ezra Pound, the expatriate poet, was reviled for his pro-fascist remarks.
Derogatory. Belittling, disparaging.
The columnist was ordered to recant her derogatory statements.
Indict. Accuse.
When the grand jury refused to indict him, the mobster was exonerated.
Nebulous. Unclear, vague.
Because the contract offer was a nebulous one, the union leaders balked at it.
Pesky. Annoying.
Every time his accountant called with pesky pecuniary problems, Ben was very blunt with him.
Left holding the bag. To be left to suffer the blame.
The profligate businessman left his distraught partner holding the bag.
La cucaracha, the cockroach. The poor cockroach has been called the most reviled creature on the face of the earth. Nobody loves him except, perhaps, another cockroach. Fiction, non-fiction, and poetry are replete with derogatory references to these ubiquitous bugs. Public health officials are quick to indict the insects as carriers of viruses that cause yellow fever and polio. Although past evidence has been somewhat nebulous, recent studies also show that an allergy to roaches may contribute significantly to asthma. Little wonder, therefore, that the pesky cockroach is under attack.
Week 20, Day 2. Redolent. Fragrant.
The redolent scent that came from the bakery created in Eloise a sense of nostalgia for her grandmother's bread.
Repose. State of rest.
While the palace guards were in repose, the rebels' coup began in earnest.
Omnivorous. Eating any kind of food.
Omnivorous eaters find the dietary laws in some hotels to be too restrictive.
Disparate. Different.
Regardless of how disparate their crimes were, all the prisoners were freed by the general amnesty.
Abstemious. Moderate in eating or drinking.
Coach Fisher issued a fiat that required that his players be abstemious.
A lick and a promise. To do something in a hasty and superficial manner.
The meticulous housewife was in so much of a hurry that she could only give the apartment a lick and a promise.
Waiter, please take this bowl of soup back to the kitchen. In addition to menacing our health, cockroaches are smelly, filthy, and ugly. Upon entering a cellar that is redolent with their aroma, you are not likely to forget the odor. And when you spy the foul culprits creating havoc in your sugar bowl or in repose atop your chocolate cake, your disposition may be exacerbated. Roaches are omnivorous and will feast upon such disparate items as wallpaper, upholstery, nylon stockings, and beer. No one can accuse the hungry and thirsty bugs of being abstemious.
Week 20, Day 3. Extant. Still existing.
Hundreds of extant copies of Shakespeare's signature came from the same prolific forger.
Vicissitudes. Difficulties.
The vicissitudes of life in the medical corps are not for the squeamish.
Edifice. A building.
We originally planned on a skyscraper but had to settle for a truncated edifice.
Sultry. Extremely hot and moist, torrid.
When he learned that the movie was to be replete with sultry scenes, the cautious banker refused to underwrite its cost.
Trenchant. Keen, incisive.
General Fox submitted a trenchant report on the enemy's latent strength.
Tongue-in-cheek. Insincerely.
Speaking with his tongue in his cheek, the parsimonious employer promised to double everyone's wages.
The roach lives on. Cockroaches are the oldest extant winged insects, having been traced back over 350 million years. They have endured the vicissitudes of weather, natural disasters, war, and planned liquidation. They reside comfortably in caves in South America, in transcontinental airplanes, on mountain tops, in Park Avenue edifices, and in television sets. The climate may be sultry or frigid, but roaches persevere. In the words of one writer, the miraculous survival of the roach is explained by its inherent adaptability. In fact, a trenchant analysis made the point that any forthcoming nuclear war will be won by roaches, not Russians, Chinese, or Americans.
Week 20, Day 4. Puissant. Powerful.
Although the debater's rebuttal was puissant, it was totally irrelevant.
Unabated. Without subsiding.
The plague continued unabated, and the hapless Friar John was unable to deliver the note to Romeo.
Maudlin. Sentimental.
A good barometer of the reunion's success was the number of maudlin songs that the alumni sang.
Levity. Lightness of disposition.
Dean Flanagan admonished us for our levity at the graduation exercises.
Lugubrious. Very sad.
She advocated lugubrious music as appropriate background for the funeral scene.
To take the wind out of one's sails. To remove someone's advantage.
Although Edna was bristling with anger when she stormed in, I took the wind out of her sails by voicing my own displeasure at the way she had been treated.
Tongue-in-cheek. The U.S. Public Health Service admits to frustration in its attempts to destroy the cockroach. As soon as the scientists devise a puissant chemical, some bugs succumb. But the hardy ones survive and breed a resistant strain. Since the average female produces close to 300 descendants, little hope is held out for a final solution to the roach problem. Nevertheless, extermination campaigns continue unabated. Surprisingly, some sentimental souls become maudlin as they consider the persecution of the insects. A writer noted for his levity made a lugubrious plea for a crash program of aid for the cockroach, calling him a victim of his slum environment.
Week 21, Day 1. Scion. Child, descendant.
As the scion of a family of wealthy bankers, Rothschild never had to face the vicissitudes of life.
Indoctrinate. To teach certain principles.
In order to indoctrinate the captive, his jailers repeatedly reviled capitalism while praising communism.
Opulence. Wealth, riches.
It was not until the wreckers began to dismantle the old edifice that they discovered its real opulence.
Obsequious. Seeking favor, fawning.
Uriah Heep's obsequious manner nettled all but the most gullible.
Fulsome. Excessive, insincere.
The actress received fulsome compliments from her friends but trenchant criticism from the reviewers.
Two strings to one's bow. Two means of achieving one's aim.
The salesman had two strings to his bow. If a phone call didn't get results, he would appear in person.
Locked in an ivory edifice. Prince Siddhartha Gautama was the scion of a family of warrior kings in northern India. He was being indoctrinated for the time when he would assume his father's throne. Growing up in an atmosphere of opulence, the young prince was constantly shielded from the cruel realities of the world. An army of obsequious servants and tutors catered to his every desire, providing Siddhartha with instruction in riding, fencing, dancing, and painting, while lavishing fulsome praise upon him. It wasn't until the prince was 30 that he took the first step that led to his becoming the Buddha, one of the world's greatest spiritual leaders.
Week 21, Day 2. Lush. Luxurious, elaborate.
The lush stage setting drew applause from the theater buffs.
Destitution. Extreme poverty.
As the traveler followed the tortuous path up the Kentucky mountain, he was sickened by the destitution which he saw.
Ponder. To consider carefully.
In the hospital, the alcoholic had time to ponder over the need to be abstemious.
Supplication. Earnest prayer.
Through supplication, the fraternity head hoped to end the strife among the members.
Decadence. Decay.
Rumors of Rome's decadence were rife among the barbarian tribes.
On tenterhooks. In a state of anxiety.
The indicted clerk was kept on tenterhooks by the district attorney.
Siddhartha's eyes are opened. One day, Prince Siddhartha expressed the desire to leave his lush surroundings and ride out among his people. He was profoundly shaken by the misery, destitution, disease, and excruciating pain with which his people were constantly afflicted. Retiring to his room to ponder over what he had seen, he remained there for several days, deaf to the supplication of those who pleaded with him to come forth. It seemed to Siddhartha that his life had been redolent with decadence, and he was determined to make amends.
Week 21, Day 3. Penance. Atonement for sin.
Following a lengthy diatribe against mendacity, the priest imposed penance upon the sinner.
Ascetic. One who practices self-denial and devotion.
The cave of the ascetic lacked the opulence and lush decoration of his former mansion.
Desultory. Occurring by chance, disconnected.
Larry's compositions proceed in a desultory manner despite the supplication of his English teacher.
Disciple. Follower.
Billy the Vampire is the only extant disciple of Count Dracula.
Metamorphosis. Change.
In a remarkable metamorphosis, her lugubrious mood changed to one of levity.
The fat is in the fire. The mischief is done.
We implored him to desist, but he said that the fat was already in the fire.
The Enlightened One. Siddhartha exchanged his sumptuous garments for a monk's yellow robe, and went out into the world, to do penance for what he considered to be his previous life of sin. First he would cleanse himself by becoming an ascetic, then he would study Hindu wisdom, in order to be prepared to help his suffering people. After 6 years of desultory wandering and attracting only a handful of disciples, Siddhartha came to a huge tree near the Indian city of Gaya. For 7 weeks, he sat beneath its branches, seeking an answer for his personal torment. Finally, it is said, he underwent a metamorphosis, becoming the Enlightened One, the Buddha.
Week 21, Day 4. Bona fide. Genuine.
When we saw the hundreds of bona fide petitions, we realized that the number of people who supported the candidate was legion.
Salvation. Deliverance from ruin.
The megalomaniac believed that he alone had the answer to mankind's salvation.
Materialism. Attention to worldly things and neglect of spiritual needs.
Disciples of materialism may know the price of everything but the value of nothing.
Nurture. To nourish, support.
In order to nurture goodwill, the management will do anything to accommodate its guests' special needs.
Nirvana. Freedom from care and pain, Buddhist heaven.
Rosalie found solace in the conviction that one day mankind would reach Shangri-La, utopia, nirvana.
Like Caesar's wife. Above suspicion.
Mrs. Drake would have to be like Caesar's wife so that no tinge of scandal would embarrass her husband, our new mayor.
Love over hatred, goodness over evil. Buddha outlined the three paths that men might travel: worldly pleasure, self-torment, and the middle path. Only through the middle path could man achieve bona fide peace and salvation. One had to repudiate materialism, keep his self-control, restrict speech, be open-minded, never lie or steal, reject selfish drives, nurture goodness, etc. Buddha continued to preach until the age of 80, spreading the philosophy that man has the power to shape his own destiny. Through good deeds and pure thoughts, man may reach nirvana. Interestingly enough, the man who objected to traditional religious worship was to become idolized by millions throughout the world.